Hello, Anthony.
Hello, Claudine.
We're here today to talk about IRS Notice CP63. If the IRS believes you owe taxes, they use this notice to inform you that they're holding your tax refund until you file one or more returns. We have people contact us quite often saying, I'm due my return. Why hasn't the IRS sent it to me? What the heck is going on? And this could be the reason why.
That's right. If you have unfiled returns, this is sort of the leverage the IRS has over you. Now, sometimes people actually do file their return, and the IRS doesn't have record of it. That does happen, so you want to prove to the IRS that you did file by giving the e-file or the confirmation. Something you don't want to do, though, and this is sort of, the IRS is claiming you didn't file the return, but you might have filed it. One thing you don't want to do is just send out a return blindly, because one of the things that sort of angers the IRS, or the system has a very difficult time with, is when someone files the same return twice.
Oh.
It really screws up the system. I guess if you wanted to bring down the entire IRS, I'm not advising that, you would file duplicate returns.
Okay. Now, what if you didn't file your taxes? We do recommend you file your return.
Yeah. Now, it's technically a criminal offense to not file your tax returns, to willfully not file your tax returns. The fact is that's not your threat. That's not the real reason why you want to do it. The real reason why you want to do it is a couple, because if you do owe money, it's absolutely essential that you file the returns in as quick as you can, because one of the things that goes on all the time, I talk with a lot of bankruptcy attorneys across the country, bankruptcy is an option if your tax debts get out of hand. And the rules for bankruptcy are different than an offer and compromise. So in a situation where you might not qualify for an IRS offer and compromise, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy could wipe it out. But if you don't file those returns, it's not going to work. And worse, if the IRS files the returns for you, through that substitute filed return mechanism, you're going to have a difficult time, except in limited jurisdictions where it will work. So you're just always better off filing returns, especially if you owe money.
Yes. It's a good time to owe money to the IRS when you don't have any money to pay the IRS.
Right, or when things aren't going so great.
Yeah.
That's really the time, which sort of is counterintuitive. And you might need to get something in order to file a bankruptcy. You might need a sort of interim agreement. But the IRS is actually kind of slow on collections right now. They're really not as fast. They don't have the staff they used to have. They have half the revenue officers. So the fact is that many people, things have changed. It's not like it is 10 years ago, that the IRS will be sleeping for a long time before they get to you.
Yes.
Now, the other reason why you also want to file is that if you have a refund due and you don't file, the IRS, if you don't file a return, the IRS has forever to assess that return against you. But if you're due a refund, you have 3 years from the original due date of the return. That includes extensions.
Just not fair.
Right. Or 2 years from when the tax is paid. So, and in 2017, the IRS on April 16th, 2017, the IRS published $1 billion of tax refunds are left unclaimed. And now they're gone forever. There's nothing you could do. Once that date goes, there is absolutely nothing you could do to get it back. There's no tax court petition. There's no litigation at all. You're dead in the water. So it's absolutely essential that you do file your return.
So it's not a criminal offense to owe the IRS money, but it is to have unfiled tax returns. Substitute for return. Another thing about that is the IRS is not going to give you the write-offs that you normally could get. So they're going to say you owe this amount, but that's not necessarily
They want to inflate
true,
the number to give you that incentive to file.
Once the SFR is done, then they can begin enforcing collections on you.
Just as if you, right, and just as if you file the return. However, this amount is much higher. And of course, you can go back later to adjust an SFR down, but now you're delaying the process, and there's going to be more scrutiny that you did if you just filed the returns where, now you basically just want a machine to read them. You don't want human eyes, because that will slow down the process.
Now, you mentioned bankruptcy. There are other options we'll talk about in just a moment. Question, when will my refund be released? When the IRS has received all past due returns or explanations showing you didn't have to file for those years.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Sometimes you don't need to file returns even if you have income, and those rules are a little weird, that they don't always make sense, that you can actually have no income in a year yet still have a filing return. Where that comes up is, say if you're self-employed and your business lost money.
Okay.
but it got some revenue. That's a situation where, well, no, I don't have to file returns. I have absolutely no tax due. Well, you have to file the return to show how much you brought in and to show the loss.
We also have people come to us and they're like, listen, I don't even have my records anymore.
Oh, yeah.
How could I file my taxes? I'm just not going to bother. But it can be done.
Oh, yeah. We filed stuff. You come in, there's a way to create a return that would be legal. You know, the standard is not perfect. The standard is to the best of your knowledge. That's what the IRS wants, is whatever's to the best of your knowledge. So there's ways to work around that. We can get the records we can get records from third-party tax reporting. Bank records are always helpful. And sometimes we just use a formula. And that is acceptable. The IRS wants you to file something, and it's better to file something than just to claim, I have no idea. Well, you do have some idea.
Right. And people will come to us and say, I don't want to file because I know I'm going to owe money and I can't afford to pay.
Yeah.
So if you can't afford, that's actually a really good time because there's a higher chance you can get into some sort of payment plan with the IRS. There are options.
Yeah.
Something called an installment agreement. That's basically a monthly payment with the IRS. There's an offer and compromise, which is a one-time lump sum.
Yeah, and I would just say that installment agreement, there's several different types, but let's just categorize the two major types. You have one that's going to pay off the debt in full, okay? Then you have others that won't. It's going to be a nominal amount to say, look, IRS, I only could pay this. And that's often a strategy we implement when someone's going to file bankruptcy to say, hey, look, there's timing requirements to file bankruptcy. You just can't file a return, file bankruptcy the next day. You have to wait a certain amount of time. So we'll get something into where they're going to get into a nominal installment agreement to get to a point where they can file bankruptcy. And then if you look at what they actually repaid, it was a small amount. And even you can get an installment agreement that's so low, it's actually $0 a month, and that's called currently non-collectible, even though it's not technically an installment agreement because you're not paying anything. So those are some really of the great options before you even go to an offer and compromise, because the offer and compromise, while it works great, you have to pay something. You know, with bankruptcy, you're paying $0.
Well, some people are afraid of bankruptcy.
Yeah, right.
For
I mean,
good
there's
reason.
a trade-off. Right.
Yeah.
There is a trade-off. Absolutely. Because an offer and compromise, you do that, it doesn't go on your credit report.
Yep.
That's nice. And the lien comes off automatically.
And what we've learned with both the installment agreement and the offer and compromise is showing and proving to the IRS with records, this is what I can afford to pay, because you don't want to get into any sort of agreement where it's more than you can afford because they know to default and then you're sort of screwed. There's also something called first-time penalty abatement some people are eligible for to get that debt down as well.
And Claudine, I would say one thing on showing the IRS what your ability to pay for, you know, that I guess if we lived in a world that was a little bit more fair, it'd be pretty easy to do and things would make sense and people wouldn't act unreasonably. Unfortunately, this is what people hire us for. They have to hire us because the IRS is saying, well, the IRS says I can afford to pay this. And I'm looking at the person, how much they're making. I'm like, you can't afford to pay that. I know that. I know how much things cost. You can't afford to live like that. And so they have to hire us to say, okay, let's structure your affairs so that we can sort of game the system, game it by just coming up with something reasonable so that the IRS isn't hammering back and say, well, we're not going to allow you to have that expense. We're not going to have you allow that. You can afford to pay this. And now what happens so many times is, this is the very common thing. People say, well, there's no point in hiring a tax professional to help me because it's just money. The IRS told me so. The IRS told me it'd be a waste of my time. What happens is they'll agree to something that's not quite affordable. They know it. They're like, there's no way I could afford that. If the IRS is looking for $1,000 a month, well, $1,000 a month would be like a mortgage on a vacation home, right? Would you go out and buy a vacation home right now? You're like, no, I couldn't afford that. Okay, that's my point. You can't afford that. So you have to get something about what you can afford. Sometimes you do have to, come up with a budget. You're going to want to come up with a budget to see. But when you have something untenable, what will happen so many times, people will be like, okay, I got to pay this installment agreement. All right, I got to find money wherever I can. Oh, you know what? Let me adjust my withholdings. Yeah. So you adjust your withholdings, the IRS down, you're just like, oh, give me 99. I don't know why people do 99. 10 will do the trick too. They get their withholdings up, so they are not withholding any taxes. So when they file a return, they have a new tax debt. Now that new tax debt defaults the old agreement, and they have another tax. Now the IRS looks at them and is like, you're a really bad taxpayer. What's wrong with you? And the fact is, like, I'm just trying to get out of this. And so the system is really set up for a lot of failure, for a lot of tricks and traps that are out there.
What I will say is whatever you choose to do, ensure you do it before the IRS's deadline. The CP63 will have a date on it you must contact them by, but you do have the option of calling the number on your CP63 and requesting an extension if you need to try to figure out the best way to take care of your problem. If you've received a CP63 and you need assistance, don't hesitate to contact us. You can call us at 888-727-8796 or email info@irsmedic.com. You can like and comment below. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so you get more awesome tax updates. And thank you so much for watching.